have some more.
So good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to a city workshop for the City of Oak Harbor. Today is March 27th. It is 5 p.m. and I'd like to call this workshop meeting to order. We'll go around the table here. We've got, I think we're expecting maybe another counselor or two to show up. We need one more to have a quorum. So I am Bob Severns, Oak Harbor Mayor, and
I'm Bill Larson, City Council.
Bill.
Joel Servadius, City Council.
Blaine Elborn, City Administrator.
Sandra Place, Public Works.
Hank Needham, Parks.
Erica Wassinger, City Council.
Okay, thank you. And we have a lot of people in our audience. We've got a pretty full agenda for the evening. So I think our first item was scheduled to be an action item. And I'm going to hold off on that then for the time being until see if we get another counselor here to have a quorum. So we'll move right on to the second part of our agenda, which is our community partner presentation. And I think that we have Island Transit, and I think I see Mary Beth coming to our table here. If you'll introduce yourself, Mary Beth, and you just go right ahead with the Island Transit program, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Beth Crandall. I'm with Island Transit, the mobility specialist outreach person. So really delighted to be here back in the City Hall again. We just have a quick presentation, just go over our basic services. We'll have some new things coming up that our new director will tell you about later. So we have three basic services: our fixed route bus service, which runs from Monday through Saturday. A lot of people didn't know it goes through Saturday. We started that last year. We have a paratransit service, which sometimes is working with our regular fixed route bus service. So you might get paratransit from your door to a park and ride and then get on a fixed route bus. And then the bus will take you to wherever town you want to go, and then the paratransit will meet you and take you to your appointment. It doesn't have to be a medical appointment. It can be going out to lunch with the girls. So let us know if you need paratransit. That's for people who cannot make it to a regular bus stop. And we also have, all of our buses are ADA accessible. So if you can get to a bus stop, we can take your walker or mobility device on board the bus. We also have van pools that can start or end in Island County, and they're for work or for school. If you want to find out more about van pools, just email vanpool@islandtransit.org. And we have a new program that started last August called Ride Link, which takes some of our vans and we partner with nonprofit groups. So right now the Senior Center has they're getting a second van for their Time Together program, so they can go to the homes of seniors and bring them to the Senior Center for different activities, or take them from one senior center to the other depending on the programs. So that's a great new program. Our South Whidbey Veterans Group has another van to take people to the Veterans Hospital or their other clinics and appointments on the mainland. And then there's CADA also has another van. So if you know of a nonprofit that needs that kind of service that's beyond what Island Transit can offer, email ridelink@islandtransit.org. And here we have some people you might recognize. Our bike and bus commuters. Did you know I had this picture of you, Bob?
No, I did not.
You and Rick Almberg in the Holland Happening Parade years ago. But we have new bike lockers for people who commute by bike, and There's one at Harbor Station, one in Cooteville and on Main Street, one in Langley at the Park and Ride, and one at Clinton Park and Ride, and one over on Camano at Terry's Corner. You can rent them for $5 a month. There's a deposit fee to get started, and then when you turn your key back in, you get that deposit back. So really reasonable. It's a safe, weather-safe place to put your bike if you're commuting by bike. And if you need a bike locker where we don't have one, give us a call, 678-7771, and we'll discuss if we can put another bike locker where you need it. Last November, I started the Can You See Me campaign because there's a lot of people who are distracted drivers, and it gets dark in November for commuters. You're going to work or coming home in the dark, and kids are going to school in the dark. So I wanted to encourage people to wear these bright yellow vests. So I was passing them out on the bus, and after a few months, my regular bus commute looked like that picture on the bottom. Most everybody wearing a yellow vest, which is awesome. So thanks for doing that. And April is Distracted Driving Month, so please be aware that there are pedestrians on the side of the road and cyclists who want you to keep your eyes on the road. So put the phone in the glove compartment or in the back seat where you aren't distracted by it, and keep your eyes and your hands on the wheel. We started last April, we started monthly guided tours on our regularly scheduled buses. So they're free, just like any bus that we have at Island Transit, and we've had a lot of success. We can take up to 20 people per tour, and you can email me at travel@islandtransit.org. So in 2019, our list of tours includes our historic barn tour, which is coming up in April, but that one's already full. So May, we have a tour to Anacortes to the Boat and Yacht Show, which you can also take a bike and go on the Tommy Thompson Trail, so that's a fun one. The Walk in the Park tour includes a guided walk at Deception Pass State Park, and maybe a walk at your new Windjammer Park. A Fort to Fort tour from Fort Casey to Fort Worden in Port Townsend. A studio art tour on South Whidbey for the Open Studio Tour. Thrift shop tour up here in Oak Harbor in October, a winery tour, which was very popular last year on the South End, and then a holiday lights tour between Cooteville and Oak Harbor. And we have some tours on Camano as well. So if you're interested in going on a tour, travel@islandtransit.org, and we'll get you in our list. Think ahead, because they do fill up fast. So a lot of people say to me, I love Island Transit, and then they'll fill in the blank of why. And I've been commuting by Island Transit for 12 years myself, so some of this is my list and some of it is people who have contributed to it. So first of all, we save money. It's a fare-free system. So there's only 2 fare-free systems in the state, so we're fortunate to have that. It's very relaxing. You don't have to worry about looking for those people on the bikes and along the side of the road. Make a lot of friends if you're on the same bus every day. It's safer than driving, especially in adverse weather conditions and the dark in the winter. I get exercise walking to and from the bus every day. And this is another friend told me this. People say, oh, I want to talk to you about that project, and can you wait just a minute? No, I got to catch my bus. So you don't end up working late, so it's a good excuse to leave on time. It's better for the planet, and it's great for our community. So I love Island Transit. If you have any questions, I'm open for Q&A. How many have been on a bus with Island Transit? Yes, good, good. You have a question? Somebody just answered it next to you, maybe. All right. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Mary Beth.
Mayor,
Yes.
might it be possible, I'm just scanning the audience, to move the wagon wheel? I see there's Barnsies here, and rather than have them sit for all of our stuff, could we move that item up? Would that be possible? No one objects?
I would recommend we stay in order, because we got a lot of people from a lot of items.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So, that's a good question, but I think we do have some folks here from the Scouts and the other two, so we'll just stay on schedule then with, next is our legal department, Girl Scout building, Girl Scout building, and we have our city attorney, Nikki Esparza. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. So this item will be fairly brief, I think. This particular issue came up when we had a request from the Girl Scouts to determine what the process would be to remodel their building. And it turns out that their building is actually located on city property in one of our parks. And it was a result of a 1956 dedication, which is essentially a revocable license that said that we continue to own our land and they can put a building on our park for purposes of providing services to minors through the Girl Scout program. So, as you can imagine, 1956 documents don't necessarily provide all of the neat, modern risk management measures that city attorneys like to see in the modern era. And so we need to make a decision about how we move forward with this particular issue. I don't feel comfortable saying, okay, go ahead and get permits to remodel the building with this underlying dedication still in existence. My preference would be that council decide if they would like to terminate the license, which they have the right to do, or enter into a lease, which would provide for insurance and indemnification and rights and responsibilities of both parties. Because needless to say, none of those things currently exist. So I'm just here today to get a feel for what direction council wants to go, and we will move forward accordingly.
Councilor Wesson.
Do we have sort of a process in place for this? Like, for example, with the buildings that we let right here by the firehouse, the Big Brothers Big Sisters, or
Yes.
use? Could we do something similar or would that be a little different since they own the building? I mean, they built the building, I'm assuming.
They do. So it would be more similar to actually the lease that we have with the pool, right? Because we own the land underneath the pool. So I already have a lease drafted if that's the direction that council wants to go.
Would the lease be charging them a fee, or would it be because they're providing a public service? Correct. So we could allow them to essentially.
It would be similar to the one that we have with the pool, which is it's a no fee, but it is providing, it's in exchange for the provision of services to the public.
I'm done for now.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there, I understand that you have a job to do, and I love the fact that you do it so diligently to protect the city and our assets and to keep us on the straight and narrow. I also love the fact that this document there's handwriting on here from 1956, and I think it's a piece of history. Is there any way to preserve this and amend it so that our interests are protected and we keep this 1956 document in force, or is that just unrealistic?
I would say that's unrealistic.
Okay, all right, well, I had to ask because I just thought it was really cool if we could have protected our interests and kept it active, but
you can keep a copy. It's a public document.
The more overriding concern is making sure that the city's interests are protected, but we're also not infringing upon or charging. I know you were concerned about, we're not going to change the agreement with the Girl Scouts. We're just going to make sure that our interests are covered. So in that light, I would recommend moving forward with that, and losing this piece of history in the process is fine.
Yes, Councilor
So
Wesson.
they want to remodel the building? Is that how this all came about?
It is, yes. And so that's when it came out that we have a building that we don't own that's on our property, and we needed to look at how moving forward we could best protect our interests.
Well, I support the Girl Scouts, so I think if that's something that we need to do, soon. I mean, get it done if they want to get started and come up with something. I don't want to halt their progress or their wishes for their building. So I appreciate the work.
We will have a conversation with Girl Scouts about what that lease needs to look like and move forward.
Thank you.
Sounds like you got all the head nods you need on that, Ben.
Yes, sir.
We'll keep you up here then for the next item, and then I think we will go back to the action item since Councilman Jim has arrived.
Perfect.
We did go around the table and introduce ourselves, so we've got Jim Wiesner now from City Council that has been able to join us.
I like one.
So, but we will then go to item number B under Legal Department, which is gambling tax update. City Attorney.
So I'm passing around a chart, which hopefully will provide additional information relating to the proposed code changes relating to gambling tax. At our last workshop, some of you had some questions about whether or not we could do a graduated approach, and of course we can. But I thought it would be helpful to see what other jurisdictions around us are doing. So this chart, the top line is what the RCW says, and it breaks it down into for-profit and nonprofit / charitable organizations. So if you move down, you can see that the City of Oak Harbor charges consistent with state law on bingo. We are allowed to charge up to 10% on punch and pull tabs, and we charge we impose 1%. We don't tax raffles, we don't tax amusement games, and we don't tax social card games. Burlington charges or imposes the same tax on bingo that we do, and exempts charitable organizations. It's 3% more for punched boards and pull tabs, but oddly it charges 8% for charities. On raffles, it imposes 5% tax, and we're at 0. It does not impose for amusement games, and it imposes 5% for social card games. Mount Vernon, you can see, is at 5% for bingo, 4% for punch and pull, 5% for raffles, nothing for amusement games, and 10% for social card games. There are some exemptions built in here for charitable organizations, but again, oddly, it has punch and pull at 10% for charitable organizations. Bellingham does not impose for bingo, it's 8% for punch and pull, does not impose for raffles, amusement games. Social card games are at 10%. And it doesn't have exemptions for charitable organizations. Stanwood's at 5% for bingo, 5% for pull tabs and punch boards, 5% for raffles, 2% for amusement games, 5% for social card games. Arlington is the city that has a graduated approach, and it has that on social card games. It's currently, it went from 7% up to current is 12%, and it goes higher if there is more than one social card game business. As you can see, it's mostly at 5 across the board. It is under council's discretion as to where we go with this. Clearly, I think that there is revenue that we are failing to capture here. This money is to fund public safety. And I think there is probably an opportunity to increase our revenues to some extent using these taxes that we're not currently imposing.
And just to follow up, I did talk with a representative that got wind that we from the paper and called the city, and I talked to him. Certainly he was opposed to any increase in any of those stuff, and didn't really think there was a lot of activity in the city, and felt that probably the revenue we get now from the punch card may go down because the consumers changes habits. So it was a major player in that arena with the punch cards, and there is a few card games that are going on that at a smaller level. He did give me an example of a municipality that raised it up too much and then they stopped doing it. So certainly this is a policy decision. We're just trying to give you information to make a sound decision. We don't necessarily have to go up to the the top rate, and so you can see here, a lot of them aren't at the top rate, but it gives us some comparativeness of it. So you could do the graduated, you could just, even if you just did 2% in the punch card, you can make that decision. It doubles the revenue, but it's not as extreme as what 10% would be. And you could start doing the social cards, and if you look on it, not too many are at the 20%, so that kind of gives you an idea of what ranges you might want to be at it, as opposed to where we are now.
Councilor Servadius.
Did you say, did I understand you said you were contacted by our local representative from?
One of the establishments that does a card game.
Okay, I thought you said the paper, like the newspaper.
No, they read the paper.
Okay.
And then they went ahead and saw that, gave me a call, and,
Okay.
and spoke to me at length, and mentioned that they do some friendly card game, and didn't really feel that there was a lot of activity in any of these areas in the city. But there is one or two card games that go on at a friendly, low amount there. Certainly, he did mention we compete with the casinos on the reservations, and so that's diminished some of the revenue that goes into it. So my recommendation would probably, maybe after knowing some information and kind of comparing this, maybe we don't want to go to the max, but 2 or 3% on punch cards, maybe 5% on social games, put a little bit on there, get some revenue. But if you go, the issue that may happen is if we go too high, then they may not decide to do it in this community, and so that's the card. Or you can make a policy decision just to go to the max, and maybe you don't want them. So that's the policy decision that you guys make.
So I would be perfectly happy exempting a charity. I know the Knights of Columbus does bingo, and I appreciate all that they do and other organizations like that, but it's for the for-profits. I don't see it changing the structure of those businesses that much, or the people that would participate, and I would hedge on the for-profits towards capturing that revenue, and I would head towards the max, personally, if not the max.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the idea of capturing revenue that we might be losing, but I would like to, I'm looking at especially Burlington, Mount Vernon, Bellingham. These are all much more reasonable than up to the maximum. I think even if we take 2% on the punch boards, that's doubling that. And then 5% across the board gives us some revenue. It captures that revenue that I know has been referred to as lost revenue, but we're not putting an immediate and extreme burden. I think going from 0% to 20% on any endeavor is extreme, and I wouldn't support that. So I would support something along the lines of doubling the punch board and pull tabs up to 2%. Even that, when I say it, sounds harsh. And then 5% across the board on the raffles. Nobody else has anything on the amusement games, so I would leave us, especially those in our neighboring communities, I would leave us at 0 on that, and then the social card games up to 5% to match Burlington.
Councilor Wiesner.
Yes, I would tend to agree with Councilor Larson. My concern is we are competing against the casinos. I think we're talking about affecting 8 or 9 businesses in our community. I mean, it's not a huge number, but these are 8 or 9 local businesses that, any increase in cost could tip them to the side of actually being revenue negative by losing that business due to increased tax. I think what you're proposing, Councilor Larson is proposing, is reasonable. I guess I would like to see some sort of an exemption be in place for the raffles from nonprofits. If we're going to put something in force there, I think we need to keep that clean for them. I also agree on the thought behind the amusement games. I think we've talked for many years in town about place for kids or something like that, and some sort of an amusement type of facility coming in that we've really never captured and we currently don't have. And I would hate to be a deterrent by having an excessively high tax there, and at the same time, it looks like 2% does not cover the cost of enforcement. So I would tend, I think, to stick neutral there and until that becomes an issue in our community, and really could be a money generator for us, but after maybe somebody's been able to get their new business off the ground. So those are my thoughts.
Yes, Councilor
Sure,
Larson.
I'll agree with Councilmember Larson as well, and 2%, 5%, nothing for amusement games and 5% for social games sounds good, and I too agree with exemptions for nonprofits.
Councilor Servatius.
Under amusement games, I could be wrong. Are we talking about video games? If we put together an arcade for kids, I don't think we're taxing that. I think we're talking about slot machines or something. This is a gambling tax, not a kid playing a video game tax, right?
Right.
Okay. So, I don't know, once again, I'm thinking it's probably pull tabs and bingo. Maybe there's some raffles. I know that there's a lot of PTO organizations that do raffles. I highly doubt they're turning those numbers in to the state. So I don't know to what degree this affects. I think we're probably, in our community, pull tabs and bingo, but once again, let's run that, please.
Yeah, the representative I talked to was pull tab and social card games. That's what he mentioned to me.
Lucky the Irish.
I feel as though I have some marching orders. I guess we'll see when I bring this back at a council meeting.
You know we like options.
I know we like options. The problem is putting options in an ordinance format. It's a little more complicated.
Thank you, Nikki. So we'll move back quickly to the action item now. And I think we've got, yes, Sandra is coming back to join us. Looks like.
Thanks, Ben. We're in a tag team.
Okay, good.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. The first thing we'd like to talk to you about is the purchase authorization for the Bailey's playground equipment. And Hank has brought this forward a couple times, one in a workshop and one as a resolution to replace the equipment. So now it's time to actually purchase the equipment. This is included in the biennial budget, and it will be installed at Windjammer Park. The total of the playground equipment is above our purchasing threshold of $30,000. Therefore, City Council approval is required. Staff is proposing to use a new purchasing tool that we haven't used for a while called U.S. Communities. It's set up just like the state contracts. They do all the formal bidding. We have an interlocal agreement with them since 2005, and so we're going to utilize that. And what they do is they give us a discount on the equipment. And for RCW 3934, we can utilize this tool, this purchasing tool. Game Time is the vendor. We've used them before. We feel confident with their products and that they will do a good job for us. The budgeted amount is $45,000. With tax, the purchase amount came in at $46,238.88. But the money is utilizing the 125 impact fees, and the additional $1,238.88 will come out of the park's operating budget and or through any donations that are being collected. So this is an action agenda item, so it's recommended that City Council approve the purchase of the playground equipment from Game Time in the amount of $46,238.88.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is something that you've prepared for us before. You brought it in. It's right around the budget amount we're looking for. It's a company that we've dealt with before. And so if there are no other questions or comments, I would move that we approve the purchase of the playground equipment from Game Time in the amount of $46,238.88 as presented.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the recommended action as presented. Motion by Councilor Larson, second by Councilor Servatius. Any other questions? Yes.
I just want to say I'm excited to see it be installed, and thank you for all of that, and I appreciate putting that playground back in its place, so thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
I think it's going to go both directions.
Now we will move to the Public Works section of our agenda. And it looks like we've got a handout here. A is 2019 equipment rental replacements, plural.
All right, so this item is being brought forward to you in two parts. There's two items that we'd like to discuss on this one. First of all, I'm sorry, may I use the clicker? I was gonna say, please turn it. Okay. So what I did here is I took the spreadsheet that was provided to City Council at budget time through our finance department, and I just put this is called the 6-year vehicle and equipment replacement plan. So not only did we do 2 years, but we went all the way out for a 6-year plan. And I provided all the way up into 2020, even though we're only talking about 2019 purchases today. These pictures are just some of the vehicles that we will be talking about throughout the year. And so that's what that is for. And I brought back this slide here. You've probably seen it before, when to replace. One of the most difficult issues concerning municipal fleets is determining the ideal life and time to replace the vehicles and equipment. I won't go through all of it because you've seen it before, but the main two parts that we'd like to discuss today is the initial life cycle based on a replacement plan and also the level of service impact. What to purchase as a replacement, I've said this before, we just don't go off of mileage and age, we go off of many different criteria, and so we have addressed that when we're talking about this fire department replacement, which is the first part of this item. So this year we have budgeted to replace the 1996 Ford van and the Chevy van. What we would like to do is decrease the fleet by one by surplusing both the vans, but we'd like to use both the vans to buy a command unit. So not only will we be decreasing the fleet, we will also be decreasing a yearly replacement of $15,999 because of the second vehicle. We have budgeted $50,000. The state contracts have opened up, and the base price is hovering around $40,000, and an additional outfitting, which would be putting in the big boxes, radios, light bars, whatever the case may be, will be approximately an additional $10,000. The suggested funding that we have is in the amount of $39,668. That's available through a replacement, current replacement in the Chevy van of the $12,002. And then we're also taking the 2 replacements that we're collecting for the year and adding those all together to get that $39,668. So obviously that doesn't get up to the $50,000 we need, so we looked and figured out how we can make up the difference of the $10,332. So what we're proposing is to utilize the excess funds out of the 2 existing Tahoes. As you can see, one of them's at $65,508, the other one's at $76,126 and some change. What we would like to do is take the additional $10,332 if needed, because we're going to obviously not try to get as we're going to get as low as possible when we start doing this, but what we're taking for the budget is the $10,332, and that would leave the F7 hovering just right around where F4 is, around the $65,000 mark. Both of those are not estimated to be replaced until 2022, and we feel confident that we will still make the $60,000 estimated budget. Obviously, because we're already at the $65,000, it's been frozen at this moment. So if that goes up, we look every 2 years. We look and see what the inflation is going on those vehicles, but we're confident that we're going to be just fine. So when we talk about the fire replacements, we talk about what task or function is this extra command unit going to do. Well, currently this Ford van was being used for a work crew that's no longer being used, so the vehicle is parked at Public Works. There is no current use for it. The other Chevy van is used to transport only 2 people because it only has 2 seats in it. The rest is cargo space. It doesn't serve a great deal of purpose for the fire department, so they're just carrying around materials and cargo as needed. The special features that we would like to turn it into with a command unit is to make it more multi-purpose. It needs to be able to transport more than 2 people. It needs to be able to have 4-wheel drive for inclement weather as well as emergency purposes, and it needs to be able to tow various trailers and generators. We ask ourselves, could a smaller, more economical vehicle be used? No. If you've ever seen the command units now, they're just packed with equipment. They put command equipment and boards in it. There's hazmat equipment, mass casualty equipment. SCBA's, fire investigation, high-risk entry, all that's in those command units, in addition to all the normal stuff of radios and cameras and whatnot. Environmental issues, could a vehicle from the motor pool be used? No, there's no motor pool vehicles that can be loaned out on a long-term basis to be able to fill this need. This vehicle has to be ready to go. It has to have the gear already in it. So it's just it's not feasible to transfer the equipment every time. It would need to be used if we were to use a motor pool vehicle. So we looked at the replacement purchasing process. On this one, we would be using the state contract, and then we would be doing the outfitting from whatever company gives us the best deal on what we need. So that was the part one. Should I stop for questions?
Yeah.
So is there any questions on that half of the presentation? We plan on bringing this forward hopefully in April, the second meeting in April, the purchase.
So getting rid of 2 vans, buying 1 command
Correct,
vehicle.
correct. Okay. So the second part of this presentation is for City Council consideration. Currently, replacements are all approved by City Council during the biannual budget process, and that's what that sheet is that you had. So you already knew what we were going to be replacing 19, 20, sometimes 19s do go over to 20s depending on the time of the year and when contracts open up. And I provided you in your packet a better, more readable, in case you didn't have it, because that one's super tiny. The OHMC requires formal bids for anything over $30,000. City Council approval is mandatory at that point. Of that list of 2019, we have 13 vehicle replacements that fall or that are above that threshold. Under 30,000, we have 12 vehicles that technically do not have to go to City Council because they fall under the threshold. The existing policy right now is to take everything to City Council that's on that list. Staff is requesting Council to consider allowing City Admin to administratively approve purchases under $30,000. The code is already in place. Not only will it save time and money because you won't have to see me coming to you for a truck multiple times during the year. Last time we did that, we actually missed the contract deadline, had to come back to Council. We ended up paying more for the truck through state contracts. So we're hoping that we can expedite the process under $30,000 and not have to waste everybody's time and effort if that's what you choose to do. And purchase request process that we have in place has 4 levels. It starts at the division level. The department head has to review it. The finance director reviews it, and city administrator is the final sign off on anything under the 30,000. And so what I just did there is I just added in that 2020 column, yes or no. Those are the ones that we would be talking about. So, you know, it's a Dodge Stratus, it's a staff vehicle, it's a motor pool vehicle. Most of the pickups are all going to fall under that. An aerator is going to fall under that. A sprayer, things like that. We're not talking garbage trucks that definitely need to come to Council, or like the Tahoes, things like that that are more complex. So I just put that on this spreadsheet for you as well, showing you which 13 would still come to you, which 12 would not, if that's the direction.
Councilor Wassinger.
Well, I like seeing you, but I understand. No, I think if we are seeing this in our budget cycle, you know, that's provided by you and Patricia and Finance and everyone, and we essentially at budget time are saying we see that these vehicles are due. I am certainly okay with expediting the process and for you guys for the $30,000 limit. It's good with me.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. You say it like it's a bad thing that you come and see us. I'm a big fan of your reports. I love this program and how well it's managed. I've seen you guys squeeze mileage and years out of vehicles, even beyond where it's been recommended that certain vehicles be replaced. I think that there are a number of checks and balances in place that keep this program running so that it saves the city money and it gets the maximum use out of our vehicles. As Councilman Wassinger said, we if it saves time and effort in the process, but we still have the oversight, which we would with the budgeting process, I'm assuming that we would still get some kind of notification and written that, okay, these are the actions we've taken after
Totally, if
the
you'd like to.
purchase.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the only thing I would like to see is just notifications. All right, we've done this, we've done that. You don't, I, for one, don't
Sure.
think that it's necessary that we come forward for every vehicle under $30,000. So I'm all for it. I support the action.
Councilor Sepedian.
So I too appreciate how well all of you do with getting as much out of a rig as you can or different equipment. Can you back up 2 slides, please?
Mhm.
So what is a dollar amount? So the nose, do we have a dollar amount for the total of the nose that we wouldn't see?
Oh, I do not have that added up. No.
I mean, I
I
just,
can get that for you.
I appreciate the efficiency, but if we had to spend 30 minutes hearing about this once or twice a year, but those nose total up to $600,000, might we not want to know what that total is? I don't know what that number is, but I don't think it's that high. But I'm just saying,
Yes.
there could be a whole bunch of 20, 25, 30,000s that
Yes.
total up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we trust you. But we're the people on the street that we have 2 jobs, it's policy and budget. So for me, I don't want to create any extra work or any extra meetings, but I don't mind seeing it if it's once or twice a year, a list. Hey guys, here's what we're going to do. I can go either way, but that's my thoughts.
Councilor West.
Maybe a compromise might be, well, like you said, if it was, you know, an update that happened mid-year, or, you know, I mean, just, these are the $30,000 vehicles, or maybe another way to, a simpler way to let us know what that total amount is, what exactly vehicles are coming up, and I'm not sure, I mean, I know we get it all at once in the budget.
Right.
Yeah, I would just integrate it into my monthly report under Public Works that I'm committed to giving you now, and I'll just put in there purchase for vehicle and what vehicles were purchased, so.
How's that been? Feel all right?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree that we can't be totally out of it. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
I agree with Joel that we're the people that ultimately feed hit the street, so. Yeah, whether you do it that way, Blaine, or whether Sandra does it during the presentation, you're gonna be coming to see us for 13 other vehicles
I will.
throughout the year. You know, and maybe that would be the appropriate time during those 13 times. Here's the vehicles that we need your approval on. Here's the vehicles we've purchased to date that didn't need your approval, and here's what we got coming up right around the corner that either needs or doesn't need your approval. You know, maybe that would be the appropriate time. That would give us, you know, probably half a dozen updates throughout the year, I would imagine.
I could also, for instance, on all those trucks, say there is 4 trucks and they all total together over the 30,000, that would definitely be one that we should bring back to council. It's the $150,000. If it's, you know, if it's the 5 vehicles at 30,000, let's just say, we could do that as a compromise as well. But I think the main thing is when we're talking about like just one truck, you know, it's $20,000, $25,000, perhaps maybe not something like that, but it could be done through the city administrator's comments. But if it's, or a spreader or an aerator, you know, we're talking maybe something that's $10,000. Maybe that's, if that's okay, that could be a good compromise for those ones. But if I can try to bulk everything together and bring it all as a package if I could, if you'd like.
Councilor Sepedian.
And I think that makes sense. Obviously, I don't want you creating a PowerPoint and whatever for a $5,000 trailer, but if there's a lot of items, whether it's through the city administrator's report or just a bullet item on the consent agenda, then it's our responsibility to have seen it.
Okay.
Hey, we purchased these 5 rigs, totaling da-da-da, here's a list. Throw it on consent agenda, then it's on us. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. We'll move on to item number B under Public Works, removal of trees.
Hank and Steve are going to tag team on this one.
Great.
Pushing this in the right direction here. So anyway, we are here today to talk about removal of some trees, and I'll be talking about some trees that are in the Windjammer Park, and then Steve will be talking some trees in a right of way.
We got to go forward.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. So February 19th, we had an arborist come in. He works with the Urban Forestry Services, and he took a look at the silver poplar tree, and it's located in Windjammer Park, and it was kind of hidden in that big dirt pile for a long time in the back. Does this thing work here? Yeah, this is kind of hard to see here. Anyway, you probably can still see it if you're looking down into the park. It's located right there. So the arborist came out and looked at it and observed there was a large crack was found between two major portions of the tree, and decay was also observed on one of the major root flares. And then I actually went there with him, and that we took a tape measure, and we were able to take a tape measure and just push it into the cavity of the tree about 20 inches down into it with no resistance. So we're intending to remove this tree because of safety concerns for the public due to significant decay in the trunk. And also, silver poplars are considered high maintenance and problematic trees due to abundance of dead wood produced in the crown. And you may have recognized this tree as we had a whole row of these poplars alongside the RV park. Over the years, we were typically removing 2 or 3 of these poplars a year because they would rot and decay at the crown, or a windstorm would knock them over. So this was continuously happening. And then they do some excessive suckering from the roots, causing uneven soils that result in trip hazards. They just work their way on the surface, way out into the lawn areas, trip hazards, rough on the lawnmowers. Guys don't like bumping around on the mowers with these roots out there. And then also close vicinity to Gary oak trees that will be planted in the area where the poplar is located. So if you had looked there are some Gary oaks slated to be planted near that same vicinity. We're also wanting to remove one of the 3 madrona trees located in the Teacher's Tribute Garden. If you recall where that little garden was there. Don't really want to have to remove this one, but as you can see from this picture, this madrona completely died, so it will have to be removed. And then I think these are your trees there, Steve. Oh, sure. Is
Any
questions on that?
Questions about
poplar
or the madrona? Okay.
So at the end of Pasek along the shoreline and Pioneer Way, we have 2 trees that you can see as the bluff has eroded off there, and I got 2 culverts that are one under this tree, and there's just the same picture. The furthest tree in the back is the first big tree, and the one closest here, you can see where that bluff is eroding, and I got 2 culverts that are kind of falling off and need to be reset. And the only way I can get to those culverts is by removing those trees. And then we're going to restabilize the bluff and then replant another tree once we're all done. So the only way I can make that repair is to take these 2 trees out.
A little bit of trivia. Hank planted these trees when he was in high school.
Yeah, when I was 16, I worked with my dad. We actually landscaped that whole waterfront. I was nicknamed Water Boy that summer. Did a lot of water.
And as you all know, the shorelines are very sensitive. We can't just bring equipment down on the shoreline. If we could do that, we could do the repairs without taking the trees out. But all the work has to be done from the sidewalk from above. So we would be reaching over, and the trees are just, they are in the way. And something I would encourage us all to do is to have a workshop down the road to discuss our shoreline, because it is eroding at a pace that is pretty remarkable. If you walk along there and see that, you'll see that there's areas all along here where the shoreline is encroaching on the sidewalk, and we are going to have some problems. But my main task right now is to repair the area that has our infrastructure, that it shows some danger of, possibly eroding further up onto the sidewalk. So I'm going to take care of those 2 problem areas first.
So you take the entire root system out?
Yeah. And then we're going to replant. Once I get it all rebuilt back up with bigger rocks and back up in place, and get it leveled out again, we'll replant 2 more trees of similar kinds.
We may not be able to get it. Just depends on what sizes are available. We've had some issues in Windjammer landscaping because the size trees that were spec were just not available for commercial. So we had to go with a size smaller.
Council.
Oh, I was gonna say, just as long as you'll do the honor, Hank, of helping plant the new trees.
We've discussed it.
Okay.
Hank wants to replant the new trees.
Water them all summer.
No, I don't-
No.
So,
Any
that's all I
questions?
got, pretty simple.
Questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, now we will get to item number C, Wagon Wheel Mobile Home Park Water Emergency Request. We have our city engineer, Jim Bridges, joining us.
Steve.
I got one.
Rich can come up if he wants. Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I will lead this part of the presentation, and I have Mr. Powers, Mr. Bridges, and Mr. Tyhouse here because they've all met with the applicant. Steve has met with the county health department as well. Wagon Wheel Mobile Home Park, it's not within the city limits, it's not in our UGA area, but they are currently experiencing water and septic system issues. They've been inquiring about emergency connection to city water and sewer utilities, and the owner has met with the city engineering staff and development services staff and county health department staff to discuss these concerns. As I mentioned, this property is outside of our UGA. Our city utilities are not adjacent to this property. It's not in our city water service area, and our water supply agreement with the city of Anacortes, which was adopted and approved in 2017 and extends into 2036, states that a municipal customer, which is us, City of Oak Harbor, shall not use water for service or resale outside of the municipal customer's service area as provided in Exhibit A of the agreement. And the next slide is Exhibit A, but it includes the naval station. We have provided service to them for decades. Deception Pass State Park, North Woodview Water District, and the city's urban growth boundary. So this is our water service area as shown in Exhibit A of our water supply agreement with the city of Anacortes. And it shows our future service area is our urban growth boundary. So right now we don't have the ability to extend outside of our urban growth area under our agreement with Anacortes. So we did a little bit of research with the Washington State Department of Health. The permit indicates that it allows for up to 70 connections. The owner has stated that there are currently 72 active connections in the mobile home park. Their 2 wells have failed, and right now what they're doing is they've rented a hydrant meter from the city and they are trucking water to serve the park. And they're paying, because it's outside city limits, they pay 1.5 times the rate that in-city customers pay. They're interested in connecting to the water system. That's their most pressing concern right now. It's possible that the septic systems have failed and they may need to request emergency connection to the city water system, city sewer system. But right now it seems that the getting water is the most pressing concern. So the location of our existing water and sewer utilities, the red is the property that's in question, and then in the very bottom of those Google Earth pictures, on the left is the water system. The blue, that's where our water system currently ends, so there's quite an extension that would have to be made to serve that property. And on the right, it shows where our sewer is, and it's kind of in the same vicinity of the water. So again, not close. And here's an our water service area, excluding those outside the water district, North Ruby Water District, Deception Pass State Park, shows the Navy base and our urban growth area. So our municipal code was adopted pre-2017, so pre-water supply agreement with Anacortes that says we can't extend outside of our water service area. The code gives the council some discretion to supply water beyond water service limits on some conditions. One, that we can only sell it to another governmental agency, a water district, the county, something like that. Council must find that we have excess capacity available. All sales would be through a master meter. We get to determine where that master meter is located and the size of it. The applicant must pay system development charges, and there's a formula in there. I think it's the system development charge for a 3/4 inch meter for each residential service. So right now that would be 72 times whatever our system development fee is for a single family residential. They must provide storage of at least, which is at least equal to the peak daily demand. The ownership past the master meter is the applicant's responsibility to operate and maintain, and each system served by a master meter shall have a licensed system operator. That's our municipal code. Also, they pay 1.5 times the rate for in-city non-single family residential customers for equivalent water usage. So again, it's outside the city limits. Anyone outside the city limits pays 1.5 times what those in the city pay. We have a code section related to sewer service beyond city limits. Right now, the city policy is that sewer service will be provided only to properties located within the city limits. This property is not in our UGA. It would require a code change if we were to provide sewer service to this property. And then again, emergency sewer service is allowed within our UGA. So this would require a code amendment as well, but what it says about emergency service within our UGA is that it may be provided, but only for the same density, intensity, number of units, or land uses that are present at the time of the septic failure. So it wouldn't allow for additional growth or development. It's just what was there when the septics failed. Our code also requires a pre-annexation agreement, which is not feasible since this is not in our UGA and would not be annexed to the city. And again, any rates charged are the rates, are 1.5 times the rates within the city limits. So Jim and Rich had a conversation with Washington State Department of Health today, and they said that there may be some opportunities for low interest loans or programs that the property owner might be able to access. There is a timing issue. They may have to wait before those programs open up until the fall. If the property owner wishes to pursue connection to city utilities, he has to make application to the city council. If council wishes to consider approving the application, particularly for water, then we must go to Anacortes and ask to amend our water supply agreement with them. And I'm not sure how that would work. And then we would also have to amend our municipal code to allow providing water to a non-governmental entity, unless we could provide it to Island County and then Island County manages it from there. I'm not sure. But we don't right now have the ability to sell to a private water system. It's got to be a water district. And we would also have to amend our code to allow providing sewer outside of the UGA. And that's what I have. I don't know if Steve or Jim, Rich would like to add anything?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of thoughts. As Kathy noted, I have been in contact, well, first of all, with Mr. Verbarnzi a couple of months ago, brought this issue to my attention and we started talking about it. I've also participated in a meeting down at Island County with Mr. Verbarnzi and his representative and engineer. as well as Island County Health Department staff and planning staff. And so from the perspective of that meeting, there are a couple of things that the council might want to know about. One is that, well, let me start by, I think all the parties involved in that meeting were working hard to figure out, is there a solution that collectively we can come up with, because I don't think anybody believes having a mobile home park that has 70 some odd units in it, currently providing affordable or low income housing to a range of folks, it's a good idea for that to close. So we were working hard to figure out, is there a way to come up with a solution? From the health department perspective, they're very motivated to see that obviously they have a consistent water supply and also have to deal with the septic issue. And Keith Higman, who you know is the director of the health department, did recently talk to the Board of Health and present this issue to them. He left me a voicemail today. It's my understanding that the Board of Health was informally supportive of him moving along with what he thought would be the necessary steps. And what that really means is that Island County Health is going to have to issue basically a declaration of some sort that this is a public health emergency, and then particularly also then an environmental emergency dealing with the septic systems. So they seem to be positioned to do that. That's important to the planners that were in the meeting because our ability to provide urban services outside of an urban growth area is severely limited by the State Growth Management Act. And we can only do it in the case of this kind of an emergency. And so that's why county planning staff was there to talk about what does that look like, what kind of mechanisms would they have to maybe put into place with us so that could take place. So not only is it our code that we would have to adjust, I'm speaking mostly now about the sewer side of things, not only would we have to look at our code, but we would need county planning to basically sign off on this approach as well. And they seemed fairly interested in that idea. Again, back to the idea that losing affordable housing units doesn't benefit anybody in the county. So there are some other pieces that are at play. It's not just the City of Oak Harbor that has a hand in here. You heard from Mrs. Rosen that Anacortes has to have a part in this. We need county health and county planning to play a role in it as well. And that's sort of the most recent update from county staff and from your planning staff.
Interesting enough with this one, it's actually contiguous to the city, but because the UGA is the city limits in this area, we don't even have the option of annexing a property adjacent to city limits. So to me, it's an example of the flaw of the UGA and the GMA. In not looking at it, this has nothing to do with growth. This is just natural environmental issues with preference of having people on municipal water and municipal sewer. And I think it's the best interest of the community to do so.
Councilor Westman.
So what is, I'm sorry, I should remember all the processes. There's a lot with your department. So this property is fairly close. You know, we're not talking about a property that's a mile away from our city limit, you know, that's currently there. So what would the process be to get the county to allow this into the UGA, or, you know, and allow us to possibly annex it in? I mean, I don't remember what the legalities are, the process of that, how long that would take.
So I think I'll answer that question with two-part answer. The process is longer than what I think the applicant could stand.
We need, yeah.
But even then, I think that you know, it would be difficult to make the case. But I think, you know, maybe you could get there. But the other part of it is the county did informally ask whether the city would be interested, if they were to consider putting this into the UGA, would we be interested in drawing in the UGA boundary someplace else, basically taking out an equivalent land area. And based upon the conversations that this council's had over the last 2 years, I felt very confident in telling them that we would not be interested in that, because I couldn't see us diminishing our capacity of undeveloped land for the benefit of 73 or 70 existing units. And they understood that. They understood that that really probably wasn't going to work. And so while getting it in the UGA would solve the annexation issue, because as you recall, under state law, we cannot annex any land that is not inside of the urban growth area. So getting in the UGA would make it, position it for annexation, and under our existing code would allow for water and sewer service, and then maybe more importantly from an applicant's perspective, allow it to be charged at the regular rate rather than the 1.5 or 150%. We can't really get there, and if we can, it's going to be a laborious process. And so I think at the staff level, we quickly discounted that, and we were focused on how could we possibly get water and sewer out there when they are outside of the city limits and outside of the UGA. That would, just another piece that we left off, sort of a technical detail. It'd be our water and sewer line, presumably running up Heller Road. It's a county road, so to be a county franchise would have to be granted to have our public utilities in their right of way. We do that before, but that's just another piece of this overall puzzle that we have to have.
And then my other question is, and you may know this, you may not, has this happened before in the county that they've had I mean, I know they have little pockets of not just a mobile home park, but there's, you know, that neighborhood out there, way out, you know, Scenic Heights, that are in county land. Has something like this happened before in a populated area, and what have they done? What is the county's process for this? I mean, I'm assuming this has happened before, that you had a utility emergency like this in the county, and what is their process?
This is the first time in my 20 years here that we've dealt with this kind of issue. Prior to me joining the city, I think we had some similar sorts of water issues on Goldie Road. So emergency connections there, but the advantage of that was that it was inside the urban growth area, or at least eventually ended up inside of the urban growth area if that predated GMA.
But there have been water systems that were in trouble, and we have been contacted by the State Department of Health, not Island County Department of Health, the State Department of Health, to see if we could provide service. One is a residential development kind of out off of Altfield across from the base. The State Department of Health ended up helping that water district fund improvements within that system, and so it ended there. We said it would be very difficult for us to provide those services. The State Department of Health found a way to help that water district.
Councilor Servatius.
Couple of thoughts. One on the UGA swap. I appreciate, yes, we don't want to give up. This is a constant concern, and we're going to talk about it more here in a minute, but everything from Crescent Harbor out, is that all federal?
Yes.
It's the seaplane base.
Seaplane base, yeah.
And we've been providing water to them for decades.
No, I'm talking the giant swath above the words, all of that pink.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And can we not give them, I mean, what are we ever going, do we anticipate, why do we include that? Is that included in our land capacity, buildable lands analysis?
It is not. It's a really true anomaly in that the federal land is inside the city limits and it's inside the urban growth area. And our predecessors, or my predecessor, shared the story that the city first put that land inside of the city limits prior to GMA, and that had to do, frankly, with per capita funding for law enforcement. It was a way to increase the amount of money we were getting from the federal government. When GMA came along, they decided to put the seaplane base inside of the urban growth area as a hedge against the future, that if the base ever went away, then that land would be inside of the city's urban growth area and subject to urban development. And that's really where it stops. We don't have, that doesn't count towards against our capacity. As you know, we don't have permit authority, we have no regulatory authority. So it's in, but it doesn't do us any good, but it doesn't count against us.
Okay. And I know that doesn't solve the very short-term issue that the applicant has. Can we go back one or two? So you said our ordinance or our codes predates the agreement with Anacortes, but it doesn't, does it supersede it then as far as where does the authority lie? Because we clearly, are there no other examples where we're selling water 1.5 times in the city limits or just outside? There's no other examples of that? You said there aren't any.
No, it's North Whidbey Water District, Deception Pass State Park, and the base, and then our urban growth area.
Okay.
So we have customers outside of the city limits, inside of the UGA, that pay the 1.5 times.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the map, please. I know the Harbor Heights land is right next to this.
Oh, right, sorry.
There somewhere.
I mean,
There we go.
So, I mean, we have it in our very near term, but not maybe near enough term for the applicant. Near term plans to hopefully secure that and then start improving it. And so whether it's a straight line across, I don't know what street that would be, or coming up from down near 7.
It would be Gun Club.
That's Gun Club
Gun
Road.
Club.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it can be a bridge that far to come up with a solution, although I understand the whole UGA adds a whole nother dynamic to solving this problem.
So I think if I could just interject, there's the regulation side, the policy side of it, right? And I think then also listening to our city engineer, there are some technical sides as to where would the extension come from, how do we get the right pressure, all those kinds of things. So there's really 2 sets of problems here.
Right.
I think we're confident that the technical side can somehow be figured out. But what we really need help with is the council's thoughts on these policy questions, because it's going to take changing the code in order to make any of this work.
And I would be very amenable to that, because I would very much foresee that whole block right there would make sense to somehow, not just the red, but the 4 parcels right below it. That's a nice round addition to the city that just seems to make sense. We can't go hardly any further north than that, but whatever we could do.
If we do the regional park, we're probably gonna put the road from Gun Club all the way through to Held. And we've already got that in our plan, so, which is outside of the UGA, to do the circulation for that regional park that would go there.
I think that's in the long-term
Yeah.
transportation plan.
Yeah, that's the long-term transportation plan.
Yeah.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that in this instance, we are being asked to put the cart before the horse, and that's the only way that the applicant is going to get any help, is that we can't look at, the UGA process and annexation of this property. As far as our code goes, it's we're talking about providing water to a non-government agency or entity, which would be a change to our code, and allowing the providing of services outside of the UGA. I'm for making those code changes if we get the green light from Island County and Anacortes, because unless we get approval from those 2 entities, then this is all moot. If we get those 2 on board and say, absolutely, we're going to support this, we're going to give you documentation that shows that we're going to support this, then it's a matter of, well, we've got their support. Assuming, based on what I've heard, that we can overcome the engineering obstacles, then it's a matter of getting it paid for, because I'm for changing the code and helping to alleviate this, not only as a health, potential health crisis or health issue, but also, as you said, 72 housing units that are affordable can easily go away, and that would be detrimental to us in our situation right now, even though it's outside the city. So if what you're looking for is, at least from my opinion, are not to go ahead and pursue, seeing if we can get everyone on board and permission to move ahead, and are we willing to, I would say I, for one, am willing to amend our code if we can get our other ducks in a row that say if that's even something that that we can pursue. Absolutely.
Councilor Weisman.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Powers, the parcel's a pretty decent sized parcel. I'm just kind of curious why installation of a new well, new drain field isn't a higher priority.
I think Mr. Verbarnsi has looked into, has tried to drill new wells and has been unsuccessful in that. Possibly the sewer issues could be solved. I don't know. You know, I don't know a ton about that. So possibly new septics could somehow be developed on property that he owns to solve that aspect of it. And then we'd just be focusing on the water if in fact he can't get, if he can't get wells to produce on the property. So there may still be other options that would be available to him.
Well, I guess the only...
If I understood the question correctly.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I guess, you know, my input, because that's what you're looking for, right, is we've got to continue doing whatever we can to save these 72 properties. I mean, not only do we have Mr. Verbarnsi here as a property owner, but each of those individuals, or the vast majority of those individuals, own their own units inside there. So these are people who invested in these homes and made these homes, and quite frankly, where else could they go? I mean, we don't have any other manufactured home parks for them available to move to in the city, even if they could endure such an expense. It's not an expensive proposition. So you're not going to get much out of me other than continue doing what you're doing to try and do everything you can to work through the situation, to you know, keep those units viable. So that's my 2 cents.
So a couple other quick tidbits, so that as this continues to unfold, there are no surprises. While staff hasn't talked a ton yet about what that code amendment would look like, we do have a pretty good feeling that it's going to have to be very narrowly tailored, because we don't want to open the door to lots of requests because it's more convenient to have the city water system out than it is an emergency. So we're going to have to deal with that. Secondly, Island County is going to have that expectation. And in fact, they may actually want some sort of interlocal agreement between the city and the county that would say that we would not allow the extension of the water line and the sewer line, if that ends up being extended. We would not allow it to serve any additional intervening properties. It would not allow for any additional development on Mr. Verbarnsi's property. I mean, that's I think the umbrella that they're going to look for in terms of their declaration of a health emergency. They're going to keep it fairly narrowly tailored as well. It all goes back to our obligations under growth management. So when you hear us talking about that when we come forward, I just don't want you to be surprised that this is going to be very narrow to fit this particular circumstance.
Councilor Spady. Did you have another question?
Just one follow-up with my question. Sorry, Joel. You mentioned, Councilor Arson mentioned, you know, that 4 block, but we still have an ordinance in place not allowing any residential north of Crosby Road. So
that's true.
There'd be another set of ordinances that would have to change in the future before any of that. So just wanted to make sure you understood that, you know, this infrastructure under our current ordinances are not going to be of any benefit to the city moving forward under our current ordinances.
Right, and of course it's outside the UGA. So I mean, unfortunately there are no shortage of hurdles here when we're talking about any other properties besides the subject property.
Thank you. I appreciated that. So is that north of Crosby? Is that an APC, an AQ's deal? What is that? Why did we do that?
Council did that in 2005 or 2006 in response to the Navy's, at that time, their new ACUS guidelines. Okay. And we also, about that time, had concern from the Navy about a particular development proposal that would have potentially introduced housing north of the 16th Avenue Crosby Road alignment. Previously, we had a resolution which said we weren't going to do that. Your predecessors decided they wanted to put that into the ordinance, and so we made it more ironclad in the ordinance. But it relates to noise zone issues and not wanting to have encroachment on the base.
Okay, which I very much appreciate. I guess I just learned about this last Thursday at the, what was that, Housing Forum. And so these are my words, not the applicants, but I think we owe them, or they would desire either a fast no or a fast yes, but not a slow maybe. So whatever we can do, my intent or my hope would be, but maybe Mr. Wiesner just spoiled it with reminding us of our own code, would be to eventually have that area to some degree, whether it's another, an extended municipal park or something to be developed. But I actually wrote down that it sounds like future growth, besides what's already there as far as the number of connections, is already set, not in stone, but it's very limited as to what's possible.
It is now, but I mean, honestly, or perhaps realistically is a better term, when we look at the ACU's noise zone map, as I think we all probably know, it generally sweeps from the northwest to the southeast. The line that we drew as a city runs true east and west, right? Because it was simple to say, look, we're just not going to go above this line, and so that's a policy question. Is there ability to look at something, a modification in where that line is based on where that actual noise zone contours are at? Again, it's all predicated on first and foremost having it in the urban growth area, and that's a different kind of conversation. But in the future, there may be an opportunity to revisit that decision and see if it still makes sense in light of what we know today.
Yes, Councilor Wiesner.
Is this in the JPA?
It is, yes. It has that going for it, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Mm-hmm.
I think we got what we needed.
Councilor Servati.
But since the applicant is here, and I know we're obviously going to see this again probably fairly soon, we do allow them to comment if he desires. Is there anything Mr. Verbarnsi would like to say, or wait until it comes?
I would. I think I could answer some of the questions. We made 2 attempts to drive 2 wells. We went to 430 feet with one. Ended up striking a large boulder. That's where the other aquifer, the existing aquifer, is at. We've had 2 wells there for 50 plus years. Each well produced 60 gallons a minute, so an abundance of water. We don't know what's happened to the aquifer. It is gone. We then attempted to drive a second well. We went all the way down to 480 feet, hit solid bedrock, went 20 feet into solid bedrock. There wasn't even any water on the solid bedrock. We worked with the county as well. Their aquifer guru, to say, down there that manages all the aquifers, they're very puzzled by it. I've actually talked with Rich Tiehouse as well, and we've talked about it as well, and it's really puzzling. We don't know what's happened to it. But we're talking an enormous amount of water over a very, very long period of time to absolutely nothing.
It's scary.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
Is there other areas around there that are
Potentially.
potentially going to have the same?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what caused it or how it happened, but it has happened. We've been recommended from Island County and our well driller to put expending funds on trying to seek water. As far as septic goes, we have worked with Island County and Bruce Sylvia, and we do earthwork for a living. That's my main business. We've searched all over the property to find adequate perkable ground to service that quantity, and we can only get enough ground to service about 30 units out of 70. And there's actually 84 units there. 72 are what are occupied and using water at this time, and haven't been accepting obviously anything else, because this has been progressing and getting worse to the point where we are now.
So I spent 2 hours at the county this morning in a Council of Governments meeting, and that was pretty much, that entire discussion was about homelessness and housing needs. And I can tell you that the County Human Service area would be I mean, obviously highly concerned. It's already been said a number of times that this kind of number is critical. So I think we're going to do everything we can in conjunction with the county to work towards a solution. Obviously, we'll have to do it through our correct codes and so forth. But, I mean, and it is an emergency. We understand that, and so I think we'll work with the county.
And as Mrs. Rosen said, the city of Anacortes, I mean,
That's
I would
correct.
suggest that that's our first stop.
Biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
I think that's a bigger hurdle than
Yeah.
what we're giving it credit for right now. Because
Yeah.
water, that's a hot topic issue at this point, and so that it could actually be quite a complicated negotiation.
Yeah. We have some communication I know that we did with them a while back. It was a different area, but it had to do with water availability. So I think that, we've got something, but we certainly have to get it again with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on that?
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay,
You can
we
stay
will
planning.
move on. Where are we at time-wise? Okay. We will move on then to Development Services, 2019 Comprehensive Plan Docket discussion.
All right. Well, thank you, Mayor, council members. Senior Planner Kat Kamak is going to join me. And you have him to thank this afternoon. I was all in favor of a lengthy, tedious PowerPoint presentation to take you through this blow by blow, and CAC said, no, let's not do that. Instead, what we thought we would do is to start with, obviously we had this item on your council meeting, the last meeting. There were some questions that came up about whether the city should specifically call out the JPA and the UGA as a docket item. And so what we thought we would do is just open it up to the council members to continue that conversation and see how we can best help you with your questions and then help you figure out a path forward to achieve your goals. So we'll actually stop right there and we'll see what you folks have and we'll go from there.
Councilor Wiesner.
Well, I guess my thoughts on this is, you know, you mentioned JPA and UGA, and the reality is that they're two separate steps, right? And you know, if we're going to set goals, I prefer to set realistic goals. And myself, I'm more concerned about the JPA than I am the UGA because it's step one, right? And I think it's currently the most erroneous of the information, or the most erroneous line, I guess, we have drawn in the sand. I think the UGA is obviously a huge discussion, and it's a huge discussion as part of the housing element. I think nobody can dispute that. But I hate to get wrapped up into that when the reality is we got to start somewhere, and that's with a conversation about the JPA, because that line does not properly reflect the long-range planning of where the city's going to grow, and we know it doesn't. We know that it currently includes lands that's now in conservation futures, lands that have changed zoning designations since that line was originally drawn, and I feel as though it's holding back the city from making some long-range plans of our own. You know, as far as understanding what direction are we really going to head? Where are we going to be? And I'm not talking short-term planning. I'm talking, you know, way out there. I mean, we're talking about, you know, buying regional and building regional parks that are going to last 50, 60, 70, 80 years. You know, are they going to be in a location that's going to be serving the most amount of population possible without having a clear idea of that? I don't know that we can make those decisions consciously. So JPA, I guess, is my deal. I think it needs to be on the face of the docket because it needs to be something that needs to be accomplished. And I'm afraid that if we just leave it as a standalone housing element, you know, kind of shoved into that package, that it may get missed. I mean, there's so much involved with housing element, and I get that you're trying to not be overly specific in this particular document or the creation of this document, and by having broader strokes, it gives broader room for us to make those adjustments that may need to take place. And so I'm totally agreeing with the housing element as being a standalone entity there, and that being a huge can that we'll probably open up several times during the year with the present talk throughout the state and especially in our area involving workforce housing. But I'm just afraid that if we don't have that JPA on the front of that we're shortchanging ourselves, because it is the conversation we have to have. And it's a conversation about housing element, but it's a conversation about so much more. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Councilor Servatius.
Thank you. I brought this up at the council meeting, and I'll kind of go through my whys, and I don't disagree with anything that Councilmember Wiesner just said. The mayor talked to me, and I wanted to take on the whole housing thing, and I don't feel like we've done a very good job. So I started looking at some numbers the other day. I pulled up our comp plan, and well, let me back up, because this is something I've heard about from 2 different folks. I think maybe both of you were at the Rotary luncheon the other day when Captain Arnie talked about the base and station readiness and their concerns there as far as housing. And I'll let you tell the story if either of you would like, because I think you were there. But when I look at the whole JPA, UGA talk, to me it just boils down to, are we able to build affordable housing at all levels for the people that live here? And so I looked at our comp plan. Our comp plan says the average is on page 17. The average income for Oak Harbor is $56,454. I don't know if that's an accurate number, but that's what it says. Island County's average $72,000 and change. I took Oak Harbor's number, divide by 12, and then I multiplied that by 30%, because that's what should go, or they say, whoever the they is, 30% of a person's monthly income should go to their mortgage and utilities. I just said, let's just take 30% of that monthly number. That works out to $1,411. I won't throw the pennies in there. $1,411 is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And then if you want to throw in utilities, somehow you have to factor that in. I took out $175 for taxes and insurance, guesstimate. That gives you $1,236 to go towards a principal and interest mortgage payment. What does that look like at 4 3/4%? $237,000. So in our current environment, based on our numbers, the average person can only afford, and I know there's some realtors in the audience, can only afford, based on our numbers, a $237,000 home. And so when I looked at that, and then I looked at the number of homes we're building combined with my property taxes, which I mentioned at the workshop, our first home we bought here in Oak Harbor since 2015 has gone up. Since 2015, the assessed value for taxes 38%. That trend can't continue. I mean, if you look at why people can't afford, it's because we don't have enough inventory. So the inventory that exists is, and I'm pretty simple at this, but it's assessed at such a rate that it's just not sustainable. In the comp plan, it says, well, there's actually 2 numbers, which is kind of interesting, but it says we have 8,677 households. I don't know what an adequate growth rate is, and then on the next couple pages later, it says the 2010 census called it 9,553 homes. But at 8,677 homes, 1% of that, for simple math, is 87 homes a year. If we wanted to grow by 1%, we would build 87 homes a year, create 87 new households, whether they're apartments or single-family residences. What have we done since 2015? In 2015, we did 39. In 2016, we did 39. In 2017, we did 38, plus 1 multifamily that equated to 5 units. And in 2018, we did 52. Well, these are permits issued. I'm assuming these all turned into a finished product. We did 52, 1 fourplex, and 1 apartment permit that equated to 13 units. Those numbers, if you just take everything else out of it, is a mess. I mean, it's just not working out. So we have to ask ourselves as a giant collective, we, even the brand newest of council folks, is what can we do? Why? Well, maybe there are some people that are perfectly happy with that growth rate, and there probably are those folks that say, hey, I've got mine, blow up the bridge and stop growing. Well, what that means then is the people that do own property, like my example of my property taxes going up 38%, the rest of the people that are left standing are footing the bill to make the world go round and to continue to pay for all of these services. So either we grow the housing inventory, grow that pie, or everyone sits here and is comfortable with Island County continuing to assess us at double-digit rates. It doesn't make sense. And so, and I'm a numbers guy, and I know everyone probably just fell asleep, but looking at that, it's like, what is the solution? Is it infill? There's some of that, but that clearly, with whatever we've done, the calculations, the incentives we've put out there, that is not working. I think I wrote down 1991, Kat, when you presented. I think you said that's when was that the inception of the UGA or GMA?
1990.
1990.
Yeah.
All right. It's time to take a good hard look at it, and I understand it starts way up at the top, but I think there's a lot more we can be doing locally to, if force is the right word, to force this discussion, not only with our peers at Island County, but then further up the food chain at the state. And so I agree with Mr. Wiesner saying both of those elements. It obviously starts with JPA because that's the bigger outline. But if they're not first and foremost as one of our top priorities, I don't know how we're ever going to change this problem. And I just, I would encourage, I just feel like we built a city here that nobody can afford to live in. So as for me, please vote me out of office if we don't keep this as a priority. But it drives me insane that we can't, every year that goes by, when you understand that deficit and how that compounds down the road from a math perspective, it's very daunting and disappointing to see how we solve that. So that's all. Thank you.
Councilor Westman.
I would love to see those numbers like back in the 80s, like 70s, what those numbers were,
The values.
No, just number of permits, building, growth. I've said this to people, my constituents, that my in-laws built their businesses here in 1976 and 1978, maybe 77, around there. And to see the growth that has happened since that time, I wasn't here obviously, but it's been amazing. And there has to be a point, I think, where we have some sustainable growth, and I do agree that it has obviously been lacking a little bit, and we had a major economic disaster sort of happen since those times now and back then, but to me I think there's other things too. This is kind of a little bit off topic, but to make your numbers affordable, you talked about such a limited number that people have to spend on housing a month, whether it be rent or a payment for a home. And I'll just give an example of something I think that could be instantly make a difference is managing the risk of property owners. We had a situation where someone decided, a renter, not to pay their water bill for many months. And our city policy is that when they shut off water to get it turned back on, all they need to do is pay their delinquent amount. Well, that doesn't include, that's like just what the previous billing cycle was, right? So they could have already, between that time, incurred $150 more. Anacortes does it a little bit differently, and I can sort of write it out, or we can call Anacortes, but you're sort of diminishing the risk of a property owner so that they maybe don't have to charge that extra water down payment on top of the deposit that they're already making. Little things like that, I think, to maybe encourage the private side to make things a little easier, a little more affordable. I think there's a lot of little things that can add up, and I'm also a big proponent of rewarding people that are doing things right in any way. Like, instead of the other way around. You know, whatever we can do to encourage the private development of housing, of all types of housing. You know, I know we've talked about this before. I know we had a whole task force on it, but I would like to see some real things, some real policies, some real actions to encourage that growth, encourage the private development. And I'm not an expert on the JPA and the UGA, but to me, and I know that there's requirements from the state that we can't expand and allow this mobile home park in our UGA, which, you know, on the outside looking in, it just kind of blows my mind a little bit. It's so close, it's right there, and to me it just seems in an emergency situation, and I hope that we are asking the state, maybe there's a loophole in the state when there's an emergency, anything, you know, to help with that. But I think that hopefully there's some real policy things that can go into this housing element and get some of this growth and ease our needs for housing, definitely. I'll keep thinking about things, and you know, but yeah, if that needs to be on the docket, I am all for it. If we need to have that conversation with the county, and that's another thing I've said many times, that I wish as a council we could sit down with the county face to face and have a discussion. I feel like I can't do my job very well when I don't know what the county's sort of thinkings are, or what their goals are, or what their priorities are. I really sometimes feel a little bit out of the loop on, you know, what is their thoughts on the UGA and the JPA. I get to read things in the paper, but the paper doesn't always paint the whole picture. So that would be very helpful for me too. And if putting that on the docket could help with that, I would be all for it, for sure.
So just a couple of things. First and foremost, staff is committed to trying to help the council with your priorities in this area. And so we'll come back at the April 16th meeting with a revised docket and a resolution that shows this as an item unto itself. Secondly, the idea of a joint meeting between the council and the county commissioners was something that I spoke to Mr. Oborn about the day after the council meeting. I said, maybe that's something that we ought to try to see if we could get together, is because at times, despite everybody's best efforts, it does feel like we're talking past each other, right? And that might just be the nature of the beast. Thirdly, Mr. Servatius, I appreciate your acknowledgement of the fact that the county is our planning partner here, and the disclaimer part of me says that, and I know the council understands this, but placing this item on our docket unto itself won't allow us to change our JPA, because we lack the ability, the authority to draw that line. But it's a great way to send your policy message to the county commissioners that you're taking this seriously enough that you want to call it out and you want to engage them in conversation. The rest of it, there's a ton of technical things that we've talked about before that I think CAC and I would like a chance to chat with you about again. We don't need to do that tonight. Work our way through the GMA but really more importantly, the countywide planning policies is really, I think, where we're going to want to ask you to focus your attention, because I think that's where some of the nuts and bolts and the inner workings of our relationship with the county, those are the pieces that we should be talking about. And are the things in there that maybe we could ask them to consider that we then jointly agree to do differently. So we'll come back on the 16th with a revised resolution, and hopefully it'll meet with your approval.
There were some comments made, several issues were brought up, and some of them are related and some of them are not. I think from a planning standpoint, and maybe we can kind of clarify it as we go. I do want to clarify, maybe the housing element is not the best way, or on the best element to look at the UGA, because that deals only with housing. UGA amendments deal with citywide growth, including commercial and industrial as well. So there's a larger umbrella. So I misstated that it could be covered under the housing element in the plan. And maybe not so after further research. So we can talk about all of that under the new docket, adding the UGA and how to move forward. If the council is interested we could form sort of a subcommittee, and you were talking about how you'd like to know more about what's happening with the county. We could form a subcommittee to talk about the UGA issues and how to really deal with that, because it's not really a compliant issue, as Steve mentioned, it's a countywide planning policy type. And in order to understand how to amend the UGA, we have to understand the countywide planning policy framework and how we can operate underneath of that. Outside of that, we're just kind of like just
Spinning our wheels.
saying things and won't get anything done. So understanding that is important. It's hard to do it in a council meeting format or a workshop format, a smaller group, because it's a big process to look at it in more detail. If there are people interested, we could gather a group together to see what's the best way to approach it, where we could be efficient and kind of make our way through this and find out what it means for us. So if we want to do that, we can do that after the docket, and part of the comp plan process if necessary.
Councilors or maybe.
So the process / precedent, let's just go with JPA. I know in the past there's a county adopted UGA, there's a city desired UGA, I've seen those maps. If we just said we want this to be our JPA, and we did send a letter last May to the county with some options, does it need to be mutually agreed upon? I mean, that's the intent, that's the hope.
Yes, under the countywide plan, under the GMA provisions, which say that there have to be countywide planning policies. So first and foremost, that's not something that's just an Island County thing. GMA says we have to have these policies so that there's a mechanism for cities and counties to talk to each other. And the authority for setting boundaries rests with the county under state law. So we just don't have that ability. You're correct. We did actually back in 2017, at the end of 2017, we sent them 2 different proposals. They said choose one. We did with a second letter. Last May, the mayor followed up with his own another letter. The first 2 were under my signature. The one in May was under the mayor's signature that said, hey, we're still interested in the JPA. I'll tell you right now, it is on their work program for 2019. It's not on their docket because they don't anticipate it turning into comp plan stuff this year, but they do have it on their work plan. And we were told that they were going to do that last fall, so they followed through on that piece. But they're the ones who get to draw the map. This actually comes right out of their comprehensive plan. So it really truly has to be a collaborative process.
By the way, if I remember right, we actually, Island County and the city actually set the line, the president, through court cases on who gets to draw the UGA based on the previous time. So the previous time, that's exactly what we did. I think we said, this is our UGA. And we sent a letter to them. And that's what started the entire process. So we just don't want to go back to the same process, so to speak, because we've already gone down that path. So that's why understanding the countywide planning policy helps us, or puts us in a better situation to deal with those changes.
So you're going to form or gather a smaller group, suggest that we gather a smaller group?
Yeah, so after the docket, what we could do is have a smaller group.
After April 16th?
After April 16th, after docket is approved, maybe we have a 3-series meeting to kind of just understand the process and what are the steps we can do and what it's going to take. And then we can come back to the larger group for options.
So this was, CAC and I were talking practically right up until the workshop about how to best approach this topic with you. So we apologize, Mayor and Mr. Oberon. We haven't had a chance to tell you about this subcommittee idea yet. But our thinking is that 1 or 2 council members and a planning commissioner or 2 to join us because they have a role and a strong interest in this as well. And as CAC has said, you can accomplish a lot more in a smaller group, particularly when something is technically dense as what some of these things are. And then I think that, again, this is all on the fly. Then we could come back to the full council and the full planning commission with the ideas and the questions and the concerns from the smaller group. And so that's one particular strategy that we could employ to try to start chipping away at this problem.
Questions? Anything else?
Thank you for your thoughts and your comments on this one.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to administration. Arts Commission, Acorn Sculpture Commissioning.
Yes. Sculptures, just to kind of give you a little history here. The Acorn kind of came out of the 2015 post office Gary Oaks removal. There was an ad hoc committee, and then one of the things they talked about that could come out of that was an Acorn. There was other projects that came out of that, and staff is moving ahead with doing those other projects. Here's kind of the pictures they had in that report of a sample of acorns. And in moving forward, the Arts Commission has took it on as a project. They recommended that at the April 16th meeting, that City Council consent to $30,000. We've got an estimate that's a little lower, but we wanted some cushion in there. We would commission probably out of the wood that's designated that came out of the post office wood from the 1985 removal of that tree. There's probably about 3 acorns that could be done for that. Once that it's approved by council to go ahead and go forward with the RFP, then the Arts Commission will review proposals and recommend to the council, and then we'll come back with creating the sculpture and then selection of locations. 2 of the ones that are kind of being kicked around right now is the sculpture park next to the chamber. If we get that, that's another issue we'll have to go through and try to get approval of that. But it looks like there's some positive ability to do that. And then also the Gary Oaks Society runs or has a facility or has a relationship with the post office, and they talked about putting it in where that little bench is on that gravel there. So we're looking for your consent and moving forward with this project.
Yes, Councilor Servatius.
There's nobody from the Arts Commission here, is there?
No, a representative couldn't make it, so it's me and Lisa will do our best to kind of talk to them.
I'm intrigued. We're talking, you showed big pictures, big acorns.
As big as they can get. There was some big pieces that were segregated for it. I don't know that they're going to be that large, but these were done as examples of them. We'll get as large as we can.
So
they'll be at different sizes. So there was wood that was segregated, so they segregated some for the acorns and some for the interpretive center. I think they're going to do separately with the city projects, or a podium, a table, and a slice that's for a timeline slice, and those would all be incorporated in the interpretive center. When we split this up and tried to get this project going, because it kind of set the project, the issue was done in 2015, and for some reason it just never moved forward. But we're trying to pick this up and move it forward, and that's when we looked at the study, looked at the wood. We just felt or just kind of concluded that this was a project that just was never pushed forward. So now we're pushing forward the Acorn project. In order for them to expend money, they got to go to the council, and the council has to approve the project. So I'm just kind of giving you an overview of the project and get your input before we bring it to the council.
So I'm all for, obviously we need to do something good with that wood. Yeah. I've got a video on my phone, because if anybody was down there, there's one large section of trunk. When they tried to lift it with the cranes, the cable snapped, and then they relifted it. That's, I'm assuming, the chunk they're talking. I don't know, but it doesn't seem the highest and best use of that large of a piece of wood to carve some acorns out of it. I'm intrigued by the idea, but I want to hear more before I give my thumbs up. And then secondly, if we're going to put it outdoors, Hank's not here, as you know.
It's the coating of it.
We can treat it, but in 20 years, it's, it took us 400 years to grow the thing. I don't want in 20 years that it gets a crack in it, the water seeps into it, it gets pithy, it gets dry rot. If we're going to do a large acorn and it's indoors, maybe at the interpretive center or somewhere where people can see it, I would be more supportive of that, but I hate to throw that, that bench just in front of the post office, if you ever look at it, it was beautiful when it was carved. Now it looks like a gray, moldy, curved piece of wood that people probably don't even realize it's carved as ornately as it is.
Yeah, one thing that the study came out, they talked about the slice being a project for the Arts Commission. Same thing you're talking about, really that needed to be housed to really, so we really decided not to take that on, and it would be a better function and would last a lot longer if that slice was in the interpretive center. So we felt that we can coat this acorn and keep the longevity a little bit better than a slice of wood that's more that can decay. And so and then we did have the society, Gary Oak Society, talked about putting they wanted kind of a slice out in there in the post office and then putting a structure over it. I just think it's something to evaluate. I think the issue we want to have, and I think we really want to utilize the wood, so we can turn around and come back on the issue, because we'll have to come back for the RFP for the awarding, and if you want us to come back on the location, we could do that too. But I think it's probably best interest of the city just to move ahead with the project. They've got plenty of funding and the fund balance for moving ahead with this $30,000 project. So I think we move ahead with it. It's better off being done. It was preserved when it was done. And like I said, there is segregated wood. And I think I have our press person wants to see it, and I have an appointment with her probably on Thursday to go out and show her the point. They put it all under temporary and put tarps on it and all those kind of things to preserve that wood and do some steps to preserve it. But certainly it's best interest to move ahead. And one of the things is incidentally with this is when that tree was so decayed that they didn't harvest as much wood that was usable as what they expected because of the decay in that wood.
I'm intimately familiar with what we harvested. I won't comment anymore. It's a minimal proposal. I'll wait to see what comes forward, but just because we have the wood and it's been sitting there, I don't want to just use it. Like I said, I'll hold the rest of my comments until I see the rest of the proposal.
Anyone else? Any questions? This is a Art Commission proposal.
Yeah, the Arts Commission, it was in the report from the 2015 report. It was implied to be a Arts Commission project, and it would come out of Arts Commission funding. I guess I'm going to move ahead with the proposal here, but if you want to bring back the whole report and look at who it goes, I mean, that's an option of you. I recommend we just move ahead with this designated property, but designated wood that was designated for the acorns back in 2015. But certainly it's the will of the council if you want to re-examine that 2015 and re-examine all the wood and to vet again what's segregated to what.
Anyone else? Input, questions, thoughts? Okay. Sounds like they want some more information. So.
I'm going to move ahead with the acorn, or
yeah.
Do you want more information?
For me, I don't recall us ever, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are brand new, that we ever got a detailed accounting or plan of how any of the wood was going to be used except for possibly a conference room table. So the acorn I'm just now hearing about, and I'm intrigued, I think it could be cool, but I'm hesitant to take that massive trunk if they're going to hew, and I'm sure it'll be much more refined than chainsaw carving some acorns, but that is an exemplary piece of lumber. There might be something in the very center. I'm hesitant to just say go carve it up into some acorns that we're then going to put outside. Like I said, I know I was there the day the tree came down. I was on site, very familiar with the rot and everything that occurred, but I don't know that we ever had a detailed plan for how any of the lumber was going to be used except for some basic concepts, did we?
There's the ad hoc committee report, and that's the the one page in your packet is the extracted page that deals with the ACORN, but I can definitely send you that whole report. And that committee was made up of one Arts Commission member, several staff members, some Jerry Oak Society members, and I think some other community members. And they did some public polling on what the different uses would be. Some of them were the timeline and the table and the podium that Blaine explained, and the ACORN was one of them. And that's the rating system it explains in there based on the public feedback that they received. So I'll send you the rest of that full report that page is extracted from.
I believe that that may have been presented as an informational item to council, but I can't.
I agree that it was.
Yeah, that's my recollection.
So if you want, I'm gonna just continue this to the next workshop. And then we'll put this on the fast track to proceed with the ACORN.
Okay. Art Commission proposed code amendments.
All right, one of the things, doing a little history here, and looking at the existing ordinance. The fund is titled Art Acquisition and Maintenance. What I'm proposing here and what the Arts Commission is proposing is increasing the flexibility of the fund to the Creative Arts Fund. This would align the use of the fund with the goals of the Arts Commission, and we already ran into this where they wanted to make a donation for educational, and with that narrow definition of the arts and acquisition, it kind of made it a little bit more difficult. So we took the ideas here that are in the purposes of the Arts Commission and just put it into the purpose of the fund, which is to foster arts and cultural programs for enrichment of the city citizens, foster the development of local arts community, encourage an environment for the success of working individuals and artists, and then coordinate and strengthen new and existing art organizations and develop cooperation with regional identities and develop the programs for art, and then further the vision of Oak Harbor as a vibrant and progressive community. This would work into some other initiatives that would, assuming you expand the ability of this fund. It actually is in 3 different places when we started doing this. The actual Arts Commission is one chapter, and then this is one of the chapters of the art of the definition and where the money comes in, and then we have another. Oops, I always push the wrong button here. There we go. We have another chapter that talks about the utility and how the utility fund, and that would have to be changed too. And then ultimately, if there was some consensus here to move forward in it, we would bring the modification of these 2 ordinances to the council, which would be essentially renaming it from the acquisition and maintenance to creative arts to and then have that flexibility in there. And this will lend itself to other items, assuming we stay on schedule. In April, I bring up the issue of moving forward with the sculpture park and the issue of doing a creative arts district designation, and these would all require an expanding of the usage of that fund. The city attorney did look at the way it comes from the utility tax, and it's kind of a quasi-general fund, so the flexibility is there. There's no restriction for us on the municipal state code to expand the use of that fund. So we didn't see any problem with that. And then what we would do moving ahead was also to continue a look at the primary ordinance changes, and so I would come back with some other changes there on the primary code. But the key area is expanding, is the policy shift and expanding the usage of the fund that comes from the utility tax that we have, the designated money that comes in for arts.
Yes, Councilor Leisman.
Yes, I'm in support of this. I can remember back when the Arts Commission came and asked us about some funds that they wanted to use for some children's scholarships. They had an opportunity to create some art classes. And, I certainly think the intention of the formation of the Arts Commission is to promote art in our area, and I think we've hamstrung them by the current language. I can remember it was quite a controversy as to whether or not we or they even had the authority to offer up these art scholarships because of the wording. So I would certainly support these changes and give the Art Commission the flexibility to continue to promote the arts in our community.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I remember that meeting, and it was over $1,000, or somewhere about there, that would have to come to the council, and it seemed like the scope of their ability to spend those funds was very narrow. I like the idea of expanding that scope. Numbers 1, 3, 4, and 5 on this list, I like that. It talks about programs for enrichment of the city and its citizens, regional entities, public art. But in number 2, I just have a hard time with the second part of that, because it says foster the development of a local arts community. If it ended right there, it would be great. Then it says encouraging an environment for the success of working individual artists. I just don't like that word individual in there. Even if it said for the success of working artists, or it ended at community, but when we narrow the language to where it looks like this might be used for the development of specific individual artists, whether that's the intent or not, I don't like the wording there. I'd like to see that reworked.
One of the things that happens anyway is they can't spend any money without your approval. All they can do is recommend. So the specific projects would need to come to them. But I think this envisions, they talked about makerspace, where, and it really translates into economic development where you foster that industry. So I think one of the things they've always done is made sure that we don't do things just for the benefit of one individual, and that's one of the things we talked about with the post office. We didn't want that to go out for somebody to make money
Well, that's
off
great.
it.
I'm glad that that's their intent,
Yeah.
but I don't want it to read that way. If it's that's their intent, I want this document to read as intended. So I really, again, I'll reiterate.
Okay.
I don't like the word individual or even that second part of that
Okay,
sentence.
I can work with the city attorney on that, and we'll take some recommendations. What it does do, and moreover, if we do move forward, and this would be a separate issue that I'd come back in April and get some detail on the Creative Art District. There's it's a new initiative from the state. It's kind of a Main Street model where instead of revitalizing the downtown, you look at revitalizing or encouraging the Creative Arts District. And so even moving forward, I'm not asking you to approve these, you're just increasing the flexibility here, and then we would deal with these other components in a separate approval if you wanted to expand with those. But first of all, I needed the foundation, and I couldn't really talk about these other areas unless we get the flexibility here. So I'll work with the city attorney and see if we can narrow that a little bit so that it makes it more community-minded than individual-minded on your input there on the ordinance, and then we'll move forward. And then possibly I'll look at other changes that they talked about, or proposal with the core commission ordinance, which is chapter 2.29. We'll come back with some possible recommendations in those areas too.
Yeah, it would seem to me that we could change that number 2, but pretty easily. So,
yeah.
as Councilor Larson has suggested.
Yeah, that's why we like to do this on the input before we we draft it. So I appreciate you giving your input now, and it makes it a little easier for us and the city attorney when we come back, and hopefully we'll have it pretty much in line and then we could put it on the consent agenda. And if there is still some concerns, you can always pull it off the consent agenda.
We weren't planning to put it on the consent agenda because it's changing the use of a fund, and so we felt more comfortable having that on the regular agenda and giving the public the opportunity to comment.
You're right. It's an ordinance change. That's a big deal. So
we felt more comfortable having that.
Yeah. Thank you, city attorney. I appreciate that. So
We'll
yeah,
that,
it won't
we'll
even
that,
be a consent agenda item anyway. So
we'll get that changed and back on the 16th. Is that the plan?
yeah, we'll see how long it takes staff to do it, but if we can get the ordinance, we'll put it on the 16th. If not, we'll push it back a little further. But as soon as we can be comfortable with the ordinance coming forward, we'll move it forward to council.
Last thing is the Windjammer Splash Park grand opening event outline.
It's actually the second to last thing.
Oh, it is?
On the other page.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Just let me clarify there. So just moving ahead on this one, just to kind of update you on one of the primary areas in the Windjammer opening was to dovetail a splash park naming campaign. The public works staff has been working with Enviro Issues and has developed a marketing and naming campaign, and kind of included some of that literature in my report last time, and I'm moving forward with that. They're looking for partnership with the school district in that campaign, and we're looking at a deadline for submission of names for the splash park by May 2nd. And then we're looking for the mayor in creating an ad hoc committee that would meet after that May 2nd, and then come up with a naming priority and recommendations, and then bring it to the council. And if it all ties in together, we'll get everything done ahead of time, and then as part of the grand opening set for June 29th, we can include that naming as part of that event. Staff, there's been a group of team members for staff that are helping to come up with this plan. The theme is Pirate and Shipwreck, which translates well with the splash park, because that's kind of the theme of the splash park. We're looking at for groups to invite to participate as needed. We have started sending out the save the dates now that we've finalized that date with the June 29th, bumping it around a little bit, but I think we've got it finalized now. And then one of the side notes with that, with the name change and with the relationship with the chamber, we did terminate the agreement with the chamber, and so there is some savings of funds with that agreement, since we're kind of not partnershiping anymore with the grand opening. And then the tentative schedule for the event, mentioned earlier with the Bailey's Playground and ribbon cutting. We were letting that go at 10 o'clock, and then start the main ribbon cutting on the splash park in the park at 10 o'clock. Looking for an event to get wet, to turn on the splash park. Dignitaries and council members are first in the water to invite kids to join. Once the ceremony is over, the band starts playing Buccaneers and mermaid photos. These are dependent upon these individuals coming in, but we're still reaching out to them, and they're reaching out to the library to kind of include that into the scenario too. So we're trying to make this kind of a day event. Incidentally, what we'll probably have is the fences won't probably come down until right before this. So this will create a lot of synergy. We're hoping with this later date that we'll be in a position to open up the whole park. So that's a good deal. And then also I have just kind of some pictures of where we're going with the park. Just a little bit more detail here, and things that go along with the event here. The playground I talked about, kind of a little separate dignitary speeches, a little bit similar than the wastewater treatment or the clean water facility, but probably a little bit more on the funner side. Here, winner of the naming contest recognized balloon time, band, Buccaneers invited to participate, mermaids, giveaways, and kid-friendly snacks. So staff's been working at that. And then the displaying of the art, and we talked about purchasing. This is one of the two. The other one was the salmon, or specifically the Chinook salmon. I'm simulating here. Kind of highlighting that as part of the ceremony. And then I just have a picture here of the Bailey's Playground, and just some, also while I was doing this presentation, it just made sense to include some photos of the progress here of the park, with the open field to be seated, a lot of pathway going in to the park. And then the plazas continues to be developed, and there's a splash park coming in, and some of the artwork that's in that. So it's just going to be a really gorgeous facility. And then some of the art is starting to materialize in it. So we're really seeing this come to fruition. And then the pavilion, West Kitchen, and I guess I'm just looking for your input and any things else you think we want to include into this grand opening.
So we're all getting into the water?
Getting splashed with water.
I think that's what I saw there, right?
Don't wear your dry clean clothes. That's what I
No
was
wool.
Water fight, huh?
It is a splashing event, so it is a water park. It's one of the primary features of this park, and that was when I was reminded here from people who are part of the process here is the splash park was a major component and a major thing that they wanted to see included.
So that includes staff, water dignitaries, and council and staff, right?
I was told it was mandatory for me to go in, so.
Any questions or input? Councilor Servais.
So at home, on the outside of my house, I have a hot water, cold and hot water bib. So my kids are very spoiled. They'll go out there with the slip and slide and sprinkler, and it's probably 80 degrees, and they're just laying. I'm sure the neighbors wonder what's up. Do we have a similar alternative? Can we pipe?
No hot water out there.
Radiant heat only.
Hopefully it's a nice day.
Okay.
It's real exciting to see this project go forward, and I think with the timing here, the fence going up, and it's just going to create a lot of facilities, a lot of celebration, a lot of times for people to come out and really see this. And so the hope right now is the grass kind of cooperates. We can take most of it, if not all the fencing down, and leave it up for the 4th of July viewing. And then if there is some issues, then we can fence off or partition off some of the areas we feel that the grass needs to be protected. So, and we will have the soldered area of the park moving forward as an option for future events this summer. So put it on your calendar, June 29th.
City Administrator report.
All right, I'm going to go through just my highlighted areas, if I can find my highlighted areas of my report. Just want to call attention to the annual marathon, April 14th. Council members can certainly work with staff at City Hall to volunteer to start with some of the remaining races, the 10K, 5K, and the half marathon. So including handing out the medals, distributing t-shirts, and water stations. So contact at City Hall Dina or Lisa to volunteer. So I'm giving you that volunteer opportunity for this upcoming event. The mayor and I really felt we had some successful lobbying on Monday, May 25th, and we're happy to announce that even though it wasn't in the governor's budget for the youth athletic field for the regional park, it was in the Monday they released the budget for the house, and the Hyper Heights facility grant was in there for $350,000. So continue to lobby them for other interests, and so it's been kind of a fun practice. So continue to work on the Navy with the sewer connection study, and then kind of moving on. Public information training, I was able to, along with some other staff, to attend the FEMA training on the public information. So there's some good information and good training on that area. On the development services side, we talked about bringing forward the planning permit, but in looking at the numbers that were kind of produced, there wasn't a lot of justification for increasing the fees, so we really decided to recommend just holding off to looking at the permit fees until we complete the Kaizen study that's going to be scheduled in July. So it just made sense to tie those two together. So that's a little change from my last report. And then in human resources, I mentioned the planning permit process study, the Kaizen improvement study. We've got that scheduled for July 15th this year. So any other questions on the city administrator's report?
I'd just like to follow up on that. The youth athletic grant and give Mr. Olborn some credit, because I know that he definitely lobbied our representatives and our state senator down there, and I think that made a difference. I think that made the difference that we were included in that. So I just appreciate that. That was a lot of work, I know, and it made a difference. So kudos, nice job.
Thank you. I also have to now acknowledge staff. There was a lot of expertise in this area that helped me as a new person to really kind of understand this, to help create literature to them, and to provide some real justification there in supporting that. So I thank the staff and thank the team effort in getting that funding secured. We're not out of the woods. They haven't passed the budget yet, but it's a good chance that it'll be in there and the budget will pass with that funding in there. So it's exciting to have some positive results.
Any other input or questions or thoughts? Or I appreciate that report. Thank you. So I guess with that, how about council? Councilor Wesson.
I had a question. I think maybe Steve might be the best one for this. So I was, again, reading the newspaper, and I had a question about our marina feasibility study. And I know we talked about this in a council meeting, in a workshop, I believe. And my question is, the very last paragraph, and maybe you could clarify, it says that County Commissioner Jill Johnson said at the March 6th meeting she wanted to enter the agreement knowing the city understands there's an expectation that the recommendations will be implemented. And my question about that is, we haven't got the final feasibility study back on these projects as far as the salmon recovery. And,
right.
I know that we talked about several items that would probably be included and helpful, the lawn tramp, and that's all in the article, and we've talked about the shading. My question is the expectation from the county that we're going to implement everything on this feasibility study on our own expense? Or again, this is maybe one of those situations where I feel the communication is a little bit off with the county and what are we to do here. I'm concerned if this feasibility study, we don't know, it could have one thing, it could have 15 things. And where's the funding going to come from for those? And are they going to recommend grant options for all of it? Or do you have any insight on, can you clarify that last paragraph for me?
So the diplomatic thing to say is that I'm not sure that I know how Commissioner Johnson's comments are being phrased or what she was actually referring to. Our understanding is that the feasibility study, which was part of what we were doing here, was to look at the feasibility of the 3 grant applications that we have pending with the county. And most importantly, we didn't have to pay for the feasibility study because that was part of the initial first grant portion. Our further understanding is that if the feasibility study supports one or all 3 of those projects, then those are the ones which will continue forward in the process for the grant funding. And we believe that we understood that was 100% funded through the county process, and our only commitment was the in-kind services of our staff time and project management and those kinds of things. So as far as we understand, we don't have any dollars committed to this. So I'm not exactly sure.
So the county is clear with what you've said too?
I believe that that city staff and county staff are on the same page.
Okay.
But we will certainly look into that and make sure. And obviously, we would not commit to something without council's authorization, and we'd make very clear to you what the conditions are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Any other business? Yes?
How's everybody feel about this time slot?
Good.
Is that open to all of us?
It's open to all of us. Just check in.
He says, speaks up.
We barely had a quorum. I'm just trying to, my own eyes included. We'll see how it goes. I'm glad you're here, Bill.
As was I.
Okay, well, with that, I think we finished our business and we'll adjourn. Thank you very much.